Hi, this is Justin from the Methodist School of Music. You're about to watch an edited skills training webinar entitled Modernizing a Hymn. As the video is quite long, there are timestamps to help you navigate the various sections so that you can jump to and fro parts of the webinar that you need help revising. Please consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification button so that you will receive content like this the minute it comes out. You may also consider bookmarking our Facebook page as well so that you'll be kept up to date on upcoming webinars and events, and to sign up for them so that you can be a part of all this training. If you have a question, I'd encourage you to write it down in the comment box below. This is so that everyone can benefit from the discussion. However, if you do need to privately ask a specific question from your ministry context, you may write to us via the email address in the description box below. So grab that coffee, open up your notebook, and get ready to learn.
Let's go through our plan for tonight. I've divided our time together across the following sections. I'll begin with laying the foundations. I'll provide you the why and the how of the building blocks to arrangement and how to approach modernizing a hymn. Then I will move on to understanding the process, especially creative choices with rhythm and harmony. And finally, I'll cover basic band dynamic techniques that will give you some tools so that you can use back in your home churches for your own arrangements. All right, so 3 sections. Don't worry, they're not going to be that long. Sections 1 and 2 is going to be a bit short. Section 3, I'm going to spend the most time on because I want to share with you the thought processes behind the hymn that you just heard. Let's start with foundations. There are several cautionary statements that I want to make regarding the age-old debate of hymns versus praise songs. The first is that I think that there is no reason to make any distinction between hymns and praise songs. They are actually 2 sides of the same coin. Some of you here are pastors, worship leaders, worship planners, worship directors. Your primary consideration in choosing a song to sing in worship should be its theological depth, its singability, and how well the song fits into the theme and direction of the service that you are planning. These criteria work for both hymns and praise songs. If a song that is performed and sung by Chris Tomlin is going to fit your service better than a hymn by Charles Wesley, I submit to you that it's a better idea to go with Chris Tomlin than the hymn. The second statement I want to make is that I think that the process of adapting, editing, and modernizing hymns is historically consistent for as long as we have had church music. The primary criticism that you will receive when trying to modernize a hymn is that you are not doing the hymn justice. It should be played like the original with the original lyrics. But if we were to examine the historical evidence, even the hymns underwent processes of editing, refinement, and ultimately modernization for their time. One chief example is A Mighty Fortress is Our God. It started out as a hymn that has a very, very rhythmic and very jumpy meter. Hymn editors, after a while since the hymn was written, they simplified the meter, simplified the song to be less rhythmic, to be less jumpy, so that congregations can sing it more easily. That's one example. Your great Martin Luther hymn that underwent that kind of editing. The lyrics to a hymn will also change as time goes by. And sometimes the changes to the lyrics are done to suit pastoral purposes. Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, the hymn that we all know and love, it has a line in the second stanza: "Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come." Now, if you're familiar with the Old Testament and 1 Samuel chapter 7 and the story of how Samuel memorialized the Israelites' victory over the Philistines by setting a stone between Mizpah and Shen, then this lyric makes perfect sense to you. But if not, you're going to have to find a way to explain what an Ebenezer stone is to those in your congregation who do not know what it is. Trust me, I had some difficulty because I tried to lead this song with the Ebenezer line in a youth camp where they never heard the line before, and there was a very awkward 5 minutes trying to explain what it was. In other hymnals, the reference to the Ebenezer stone is simplified to "Here I raise to thee an altar." Now, not quite a memorial stone, but the idea is still consistent. But yet, in other hymnals, the whole 2 lines containing the Ebenezer reference is changed entirely. "Hitherto thy love has blessed me, thou hast brought me to this place, and I know thy hand will bring me safely home by thy good grace." Very different lyrics, right? Therefore, I think it is not out of turn, or it is not with unholy aspirations that we come and seek to modernize a hymn. Ultimately, we want to be authentic in our expression of worship. So my question to you leaders and planners out there, what does authentic worship look like for your congregation? If it means that there's a pipe organ with a 30-piece SATB choir, then by all means, find arrangements for that kind of musical context and glorify God with them. But if your context and if your background is a church that has got a 4-piece rock band, guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, I submit to you that authentic worship in your context, it is a legitimate task of trying to modernize the hymn for your congregation. So, what does authentic worship look like in your church? Now that I covered the why, I'm going to cover the how and the summary of tonight's lesson. If you forget everything else that I shared tonight, I want you to at least remember this statement that summarizes the process of arrangement. Your creative output depends on your creative input. I'll say that again. Your creative output depends on your creative input. The most important skill you need to hone when it comes to arrangement and modernizing hymns is listening. Listening, I dare say, is 90% of the work. And I'm not talking about casual listening, like listening in the background while you're trying to study or work on something. I'm talking about critical listening, developing the ear that is able to pick out the nuances of different genres of music and to have a bank of musical ideas at your disposal. Your ear must be able to tell what makes a piece of music work. Are you able to describe what gives a piece of music its unique sound? Can you determine what tools that the composer, the lyricist, and the musicians use to achieve the emotional impact of the song? Even in the word arrangement, it assumes that there is something there to arrange. Now, I want you to imagine this with me. Imagine you are redecorating your home. If your house follows a Marie Kondo kind of style of minimalism, let's say your living room has nothing in it except one table, your house will still look the same even if you were to move that single table from one spot to another spot, because there's nothing there. But if you have more furniture, you have a couch, if you have a TV, if you have a table piece, if you have vases, ornamental stuff, if you have all these things around, if you're to move them around, just change the layout, just change the position of these items, you can change the flow of the room, the look of the room, and ultimately the feel of the room. It's the same with music. If the house of musical ideas in your mind is minimalist, then there's nothing much to move around and change. But if there are more items to play around with, you will have access to a greater number of variations. My first advice in developing an ear to listen critically and also to develop musical ideas is to listen by rotating genres. So if you're used to one type of genre of music, I challenge you today to expand your listening base. You can try to rotate monthly. Let's say if you're already quite conversant with rock music, I can encourage you, next month, try blues. Next month, try classical. Next month, try electronic, if you dare. I personally don't like electronic music, but I listen to it because that's what our youth are used to. Once you're doing this kind of macro level rotation, so with this macro level rotation, so this just means that you're listening to different big blocks of genres, classical, electronic, dance, etc. Once you're comfortable with that kind of rotation, I encourage you to challenge yourself even further by doing micro level rotation. Listen to music with different subgenres. As you all know, rock music is not a monolithic genre. It contains many different types of rock music: alternative, blues rock, progressive rock, psychedelic rock, so on and so forth. Same goes with country music. If you like to listen to country music, maybe you can try to differentiate between the differences in Cajun music, bluegrass music, Americana music. There's so many things that you can listen to and look out for. The idea is to be varied. I'm willing to bet that many of you have a Spotify account. I challenge you, use it. Use that Spotify account beyond your favorite 1 or 2 albums that you listen to day in and day out. As a short aside, I used to be a full-time staff in my church, overseeing the worship teams. And one of the processes that I had a hand in changing and amending in my time there as the worship director there was I handled the audition process. In my revised audition form, I put down three lists that I wanted people to fill in. Each list had 3 items. I wanted people to list down their 3 top worship bands or worship songs or worship albums. I then wanted them to list down their 3 top non-worship bands, albums, or musicians, if they can name them. And finally, I wanted to know if they can list down the 3 top radio stations that they listen to. I can sense some of you going, how is this relevant? Let me share some interesting truth. The truth is, the more you're able to fill up all these columns, the 9 pieces of information, 3 different lists, your worship bands, your non-worship bands, and radio stations. The more you could fill that up, the likelier you were going to be more musically creative on your team. Because, very simple, your radio preferences, they told me what kind of sounds you were accustomed to. 92.4, you were a classical person, or you liked the jazz program that was on 92.4. Class 95, that meant that you had a mixture. You were familiar with both vintage and modern sounds. If you listed down, and this happened with the millennials in my worship team, Power 98, 98.7, these guys were more modern. These guys were more up to date with musical styles, what's actually current. And if you listed 99.5, Lush 99.5, which was still a station back then, those were my favorite people because 99.5 had the weirdest music out there, all the eclectic, all the polyrhythm songs, all the songs of bands you never heard before or you couldn't pronounce, bands from other countries, bands from, I remember an Icelandic band that I got into because of Lush 99.5. If I knew that you would listen to that, you became my best friend in the worship ministry. But anyway, the point is this. The more diverse your listening is, the likelier it is very more likely that you've got more musical ideas in your head to draw from. And this is especially important if you want to try something new, try something modern with the hymns. So my second advice when it comes to developing your ear and to accumulating musical ideas is to listen to the music that you encounter daily. There is music everywhere you go. The television, the movies you watch, even commuting and going shopping. You encounter music everywhere you go. When you watch The Simpsons, can you pick out the scale that's being played by the main theme? I missed a note there. But that's the Lydian dominance. That's a Lydian dominant mode. Can you pick that out? Can you pick out, those of you who watch Wonder Woman in the cinema, the theme song is in 7/8. It's got a diminished scale. It's got a diminished chord in the main theme. I apologize for those wrong notes. My guitar is really in an awkward position when I'm trying to do this web streaming thing. The point is this: are you able to pick those out? I encourage you. There are so many things that you can do to expand your listening diet, your listening palette. Some of you guys wait around for the movie to end, right? Wait for the credits, and then you try and look for the songs that are in the end credit scene. Look up for the composers. Who composed the music? There are more composers out there than Hans Zimmer and John Williams, for example. Really expand yourself. We are in a world of free access to information. All you need to do is type it in YouTube. You can probably find it. And I encourage you. This is all free. This is all good stuff, and it's free. That's the best combination, right? The point is, the world has so much music to offer, and you are selling yourself short if you only listen to your favorite music. All right? Let's move on to the process proper. Now, before we go on, we need to understand some features of traditional hymn music and how they're typically performed on the Sunday service. Now, I'm going to identify two features. I know there are much more things that can be said. I'm sure Judith and some of the people here who've done hymnology before can totally trump me with much more information. But for tonight's purposes, I'm going to focus in on two aspects of hymn music that is the most readily identifiable by most laypersons. The first is a hymn is typically performed in a traditional service in the homorhythmic style. In other words, homorhythm. One chord on every beat with a melody that follows that rhythm exactly. Homorhythm, you can hear it. We all know this sound when we instantly hear it. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Automatically, when I played it like that, you thought, oh man, that is so traditional. That is so traditional service. Now, that's why the homorhythm style, the homorhythmic style, is the reason why it sounds like that. One chord for every beat, and the lyric is, the melody follows that rhythm super exactly. And not to mention, the homorhythmic style perhaps sounds better with an organ because they're able to play those polychords much better than me. Now, the second feature of hymn music is typically there is a lack of dynamics. And I know that when I say lack of dynamics, some of you music directors and choral directors here are internally crying. I'm not trying to push any blame on you. I'm not saying anything bad about you. I'm sure you guys are picky about the way that your choirs and ensembles play the hymns. But just based on empirical observations, if you go to a traditional service, if you go to my church, for example, in a traditional service, the worship leader and the musicians, they're all lay persons. They're not professional musicians. So they tend to sing everything one-dimensionally. It's either on or off. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy praise. And that kind of one-dimensional dynamic for the whole song, for the whole hymn. Again, I'm not digging at any of the professional music directors in our midst. It's just an empirical observation based on how I've noticed other churches on a typical Sunday morning, how the hymns typically sound. Once we've understood these two features, the homorhythmic style and the lack of dynamics, we are then able to compare and contrast against modern music and its delivery. What do we know about modern music? Well, if you were to examine my playing of the guitar, how I played the guitar in the homorhythmic style, your first comment would be, that's just way too many chords. Way too many chords. Modern music has far less chords. Functionally, modern music will deploy the bare minimum number of chords to support a melody. Secondly, you might find it awkward that right from the start of a hymn, we sing at forte and we just keep that one-dimensional dynamics. Modern music deploys much more varied dynamics. There's places where there's soft, there's places where there's loud, there are places where there's a lot going on, very intense, but there are also places where there's quiet contemplation. So in other words, volume and intensity are tools in the modern music toolbox that they use to tell the story of a song. More of that to come in the next section. Let me go through the 3 steps and I'll share them with you right now. The first step, in modernizing a hymn, I think, should be to simplify the chords. Most hymns can be played with the 1, the 4, and the 5. 1, 4, 5. Tonic, subdominant, or dominant for those the technical people among us. Or in the case of D major, your D, your G, and your A. 1, 4, 5. And these chords, you choose these chords, the simple chords, to support the melody, the vocal melody. I'm going to give the example right here. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never failing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. That sound moved us out of the 1600s, but that's still a pretty 1950s kind of sound. But it's an improvement. We fast forwarded 300 years just by simplifying the chord to the 1, 4, 5. Those of you who read music theory and music history will know that the 1, 4, 5 is a very popular pop song structure device that was used in the 50s and 60s. Step 2, your second step in modernizing a hymn is to vary the dynamics. Remember, we want to avoid the one-dimensional on-off kind of playing in a hymn. So you have to start to decide, choose parts of the hymn that you want to be soft, choose parts of the hymn that you want to be loud, and craft that story, of low volume, then build up to an intense part, then build back down, like a journey. For example, you might want to choose, let's say you're doing one stanza of the song. Let's say you want to have, teach me some melodious sonnet, some with flaming tongues above as the apex, as the peak of your dynamics, the main point that you want to bring across, or like the point that you want to emphasize. You can try this. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never failing, soulful songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. For example, so you simplify your chords, you've added some dynamics. At this juncture, I want to address the support singers in our midst, or those of you who plan the parts for support singing. The traditional style and a very traditional sound is a 4-part harmony that is on all the time. If you want to modernize the way your vocals sound like, the fastest way to do it is to remove that 4-part harmony and only introduce harmonies sparingly. The modern ear is very used to hearing harmonies in the 3rd above and the 4th below. This is your typical country. It's very popular in country music, but the upper 3rd and or the lower 4th is the kind of harmony that our ears are used to hearing. You can use that maybe in the chorus, and later on in the song, for All Creatures, when I go through the arrangement, I'll share with you where I put that upper 3rd harmony. Now, further to step 2, this is the part where I call dynamics mapping of a song. Every song is an opportunity to tell a story of the lyrics. And with dynamics, we're able to plot a journey to match the music with the lyrics better. If the lyrics become somber and emotional, it's a good idea to play softer and evocatively to follow that somberity. If the lyrics are loud and triumphant, you want to match that by being loud and intense. So to help visualize this on paper, I have a tool that I want to share with you over here. This is Paul Baloch's Listen and Learn table. And you can find this on his leadworship.com website. What essentially this is this maps out on paper from intro to the end how a song is going to be mapped. The idea is this. Paul Baloch advocated that worship teams get together for listening parties. And we can't do that now because it's COVID-19, but maybe you can do this over Zoom with your worship team. The main idea is that everyone listens to a song, and as they listen to the song, let's say I'm the acoustic guitar player because I got it here, I start to fill in from the intro to the ending and identify what it is I'm playing. I use my own words. So I might try to identify, am I playing chords? Am I strumming those chords? Am I finger picking those chords in the intro, for example? Then do I move on to a gradual light strumming in A section, B section, and then when I go to A2, B2, I can go to a bigger strum, and to the bridge, I play really loud, really intense. And then by B3, I start to loosen up, to play less, and then by ending, I don't play at all. For example, of course, there are terms that you can use, and I'm going to recommend some terms to form your vocabulary in band dynamics. But this is one of the ways to visually map out what a song looks like. If this is completely new to you, I encourage you to use this tool and write it out on paper by hand long enough and enough times, and critically with let's do your heavy songs in rotation, the songs that are in your church. Try and map them out. Try and map all these songs out. Let's say just for acoustic guitar, if you're an acoustic guitar player. If you do this enough times on paper, I can guarantee you can do this in your head the more you familiarize yourself. And then pretty soon you'll be able to be conversant with some of the ideas, like how to go from soft to loud, or I'm going to drive from soft to loud. There are times where there are accents, there are hits, there are parts where there are punches in the song. I know where those are, I know how to articulate, and I know how to write them down on paper, I know how to execute them in my mind and with my instrument. My challenge for music directors, for worship leaders and music planners out there, if you want to, do this for every single instrument in a song. So you by yourself, fill in every single instrument, piano, acoustic guitar, drums, etc., etc. This will give you an idea of how to be conversant and fluent when you're talking to your other instrument players, your other musicians. Let's say, hey, I want the electric guitar to do a volume swell in the intro because you don't need to play there very much. I just need some texture, for example. Drums, I want you to play a jungle groove in the A section that will develop into a full groove by the B section, for example. These terms are not, these terms are highly contextual. So your band terms, right? Some of you guys in your own churches will have different terms to denote the same things out, and it really depends on your context. Just go with the lingo that you have in your church, and that's really cool because you can develop and grow with a certain musical identity of your church if you do this long enough. The point I'm trying to make is this: if you do this long enough, you'll be able to, in your mind, split the different tracks, right? And you will know how each track is supposed to sound like to contribute to the whole sound of the song. If you want if you want to create a texture, you want to create a very ethereal texture in a certain section of a song. How do you do that? That means the cymbals have to be like cymbal swells with washy, a washy cymbal swell with that he uses the padded stick to do that. You're going to get your bass player to play up high and play very long notes. You're going to get your guitar player to fade in, to volume swell in his delay and reverb pedal. If this is all completely new to you, I understand this is hard stuff to get to. This kind of familiarity with band dynamics and the band terms will only really come about the more you practice them. And it took me around 3-4 years of being a music director to be conversant and fluent in these terms for my church. So if I were to be an MD in your church, I might have to learn some of the lingo that you guys use. Okay, anyway. Let's move on. Finally, in step 3, we've reached step 3. Now that you've simplified the chords and you've varied your dynamics, it's time to consider anything more creative that you want to do. To be honest, if you stopped at step 2, that's perfectly fine. Simplifying the chords and varying dynamics is a huge step in modernizing a hymn. If this is the limit of your creative endeavors, that's okay. But I encourage you, if you want to push the boundaries and explore the creative potential of your team, step 3 will prove to be the most fun and rewarding of the 3 steps. Step 3 is the most dependent on your creative input. If you have a large library of musical ideas to draw from, this is where you use them. For example, as an acoustic guitar player, I might draw inspiration from a modern acoustic playing style, and I will choose those modern voicings in Come Thou Found. The chords look very complicated, they're actually not. All that is I'm sticking to one chord shape, and I'm just changing the bass note. That sounds like this. Come Thou Fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy praise, streams of mercy, never failing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above, brings a mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. So a modern acoustic guitar sound is having the same 3 notes ring out and then changing the bass notes, for example. One thing that I want to share with y'all, and this is a freebie I'll give y'all, I want to be a bit more creative. And I know that in the line, "Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee." These are very powerful words. They are mysterious because I don't know how grace and goodness binds. I don't know how these are bound to my heart. And there's a certain mystery to them. There's a certain wonderment or a sense of wonder with them. Now, I know it musically. How do I express this musically? I know this in my head that I want it to be mysterious sounding. How do I evoke a sense of mystery, a sense of wonderment, a sense of awe? I know that the Lydian mode is a mode that has the augmented fourth, the raised fourth interval. Raised fourth or flat fifth, depending on your outlook in life. That's a Bill Bailey joke, by the way. With the Lydian mode, it emphasizes an interval called the augmented fourth. Side note: this interval was banned by Council of Trent, by the way. Church history. Anyway, back to the modern world. I want to evoke a sense of wonderment and awe. Now, I know that the raised fourth and the Lydian mode can do that. When I put this over a D drone, a D major drone, how does it sound like? Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. That movement. Bit more spacey sounding, right? Yeah, anyway. Sorry for those wrong notes there. Yeah. So these are the kind of sounds that I have in my head that are different from your stock block chords. if you play chords like this, that's absolutely fine. If you play your standard D, A, G chords, that's fine. It's still a valid musical choice. If you want to modernize it, you might have to look at ways to internalize that sound. And I assure you, these are not very difficult to pick up. You hear any pop music with acoustic guitar in it, most likely they've got these kind of open chord voicings, open string voicings. And open string voicings, by the way, is also how we get away with simplifying our guitar parts on the guitar. So don't tell your guitar players I gave away our secret, that we actually like to play simple chords, and we play cheat lah, basically. All right. Now, further to step 3, I'm not saying that we should do unbridled experimentation with music and arrangement. Remember, your primary consideration with music for worship is to provide a conducive environment to worship. Choosing an arrangement and changing the arrangement is like adjusting the legs on a stool. If you make slight changes to the rhythm and the harmony, the stool is going to be still stable and people won't feel uncomfortable. But if you make a drastic change to any of the musical components, that's like making one leg of the stool longer than the others, and you'll make people sit on the edge of their seat, or at worst, you're going to make them tip over and fall. My general guideline is that for congregational singing, where we want people to participate in singing, choose to go with a simpler, stable arrangement. For other uses where the congregation is not expected to participate, that's when you can maybe really let loose, let those creative juices flow, depending on your church leadership, of course. Let me give you an example. I was issued a challenge to play. My church is a little more liberal in the offertory segment, and there are very few times where we're able to play something for the offertory, because most of the time it's taken up by announcement videos and the like. So I always try to make the offertory music a bit more special, something that people don't really listen to very often. And my church is pretty cool. They're pretty cool with it. They do like certain sounds that I come up with, and this is one arrangement that my band came up with to play Come Thou Found, and it goes like this. Come Thou Found. I forgot the intro. Come Thou Fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy praise. Streams of mercy never failing, call for songs of loudest praise. Sing me some the Lord is sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Now, this is going to be available on the slide, so feel free to take it and use it in your church. But with caution, as I said before, this is really dependent on your congregational context. I think that it's safe to say if you do this in a black gospel church, no problem. Every musician is expected to know this kind of musical style. But if you're a church like mine, where we are used to more, let's say, the standard rock and roll, not rock and roll, standard rock kind of sound, this might be a bit like pushing the edge, pushing the boundary a bit. My point is this: you want to do step 3, you want to be creative. Yes, you go ahead and do it, but you need to be conversant with the style. You need to know what makes the style work. For example, if you want to do jazz, you need to know basic jazz moves like the 2-5-1. C sharp minor 7 flat 5 and F sharp 7 are the 2-5-1 of B minor. A minor 7 and D7 are the 2-5-1 of G major. Do you understand what that means? If you don't, you need to find out what that is, and you need to internalize the sound. You need to know how those things work in jazz so that you can apply it elsewhere. Now, my caution with doing extreme, like unstable arrangements like this, is that with a complex harmony, this completely overturns your step one. Where step one was in step one, we wanted to simplify the chords, right? This completely overturns our step one. So do this with caution. Be creative with caution. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes people get a newfound appreciation for the song. Sometimes you get the like the awkward silence, and like no one really, like everyone tries to look away from the team like at the end of the offertory, and then the band is like, okay, after this, we're just going to run straight to the seats and just sit down. There are awkward moments like that in church. But we do that all in love and grace. So we are musicians now. We need to be creative. Okay, we've now come to the last section of tonight. The time now is 9 o'clock. That's good time. I'm going to try and spend the most time on this section because this is where we're going to talk about how we arranged All Creatures of Our God and King. I could subtitle this section Step 3 on Steroids, because we're going into the nitty-gritty details as to how we arranged the song creatively. But first, we need to have some handle on the vocabulary that I'll be using in this section. This slide contains brief definitions of some band dynamics techniques. If they are unfamiliar to you, don't worry, you can watch this video again when it comes out on YouTube and revise the section again. Now, basic band dynamics. The thing is, I could go on and talk about more things like advanced band dynamics. It's obviously a lot more than just the two categories here. But for basic band dynamics, stuff that you can apply with your band right now, this list is it. You can take this list and you can get your band to learn them. You have enough ammunition to do many things. Broadly speaking, it is in two categories: volume, intensity, and modulation, depending on the element of music that you're trying to vary. Now, let's go through some of them, okay? Let's say I have let's say I've got a progression, simple DG, and I'm gonna just make some. I'm gonna vocalize vocalize something just to demonstrate. Okay, a cut is an abrupt stop with a choke, which means everyone don't play. Everyone has to try and stop the sound coming from the instruments. The acoustic guitar player chokes his strings. The bass player chokes his note. Drummer choke the cymbal or like rapidly hits the snare without any rebound. This is it. So I'm going to cut soon. I'm going to cut again. That's a cut. A hang is a less abrupt version of a cut, and instead of choking the strings or choking the sound, you want the sound to sustain. Let's go back to our nonsensical song. Put a hang over here. So you heard that very long, drawn out one note with the last note, right? On the D major, that's a hang. Now, a punch, or you can call it a hit. These are accents and when you're playing in the music. This is to when you accent together. It's the guitar player is purposely playing louder on those hits. Your drummer may be accenting also with an open hi-hat sound, or like hitting together the drums and the toms. For example, like this. Heard that? The ba ba bam, dum bum, ba ba ba. Those are punches. The very short rhythmic punches that everyone punches together. Now, to increase or decrease dynamics, you can do that in a few ways. There's the drive, which is you increase your volume and intensity from soft to loud. You can do an 8th note drive. So for example, let's say I'm doing this verse here. I want to drive up to the chorus. So between that verse 1 and verse 2, I did a drive to increase that dynamics from soft to loud. Now a ramp is just a quicker drive. You want to make it shorter, maybe half a bar. Now pull back is just the reverse. If you're playing from loud and you want to go to a softer section. Everybody pull back a bit. Do a hang. So you'll hear all this in more detail as we go to the arrangement proper in the next in upcoming section. Modulation. I just want to say something very quick about modulation. One way to really change the flavor or change the direction of a song is to up key or down key, change the key of a song. When you change the key of a song, you need to choose transition chords for the key change. I know all of you grade 8 music theory people out there, you all can plot complicated ways to go from one key to the next key. But for tonight, for basic band dynamics, I'm going to introduce something a bit more simple. It's just moving from the 5th chord to the 1 chord of the new key. That just sounds like this. So there you go. The 4th chord here. So you heard that? You heard that? I was on the 5th chord of the new key. I'll do it again. Of course, there are many ways to do a key change, but that's the simplest way to do it, and I give that tool to you so you can try and experiment with it as you go on. All right, for the rest of this section, I'm going to have to exit out of my production screen here, and I need to show this to you. Time now is 9:05. I have 40 minutes, thereabouts, to talk about this song that you just heard. Let me break down to you my process when it comes to arranging a song. When I get the instruction to arrange a song, I need to consider a few factors. I need to consider how many people in a band is going to be in it. I need to consider, are there any special things about this song that you want to highlight, to emphasize, to bring about? Now, this particular arrangement, All Creatures Are God and King, we decided to medley with 乃是配得 because this was a song that we used in our certificate of Christian worship class. In one of our modules, we wanted to do bilingual worship, and one of the ways we thought, okay, why don't we try to medley 2 songs together? So this was a challenge to me, issued to me and the team, to come up with an arrangement like this. I knew that in my head I needed to medley 2 songs. How was I going to chart and map that? Well, All Creatures has a few stanzas, and 乃是配得, I wasn't going to do the whole song, I was just going to do, let's say, the chorus and the bridge. I was going to, with that in mind, I knew that there were going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, there were going to be like 5 sections that I was going to play with. And so I picked and I chose the sections to incorporate into the arrangement. I knew that I needed to have the verses of All Creatures Are God and King. And All Creatures doesn't have a refrain, it doesn't have a chorus. So why not we make 乃是配得, the chorus of 乃是配得, as the chorus of the arrangement? So that way you could differentiate between the verses of All Creatures and with a chorus. So that's where the idea came to use the choruses and the bridge of 乃是配得 as like a chorus in the arrangement. And then I knew that I wanted to be musically, I knew that I had to incorporate many elements of band dynamics in the song because, well, this was going to be a demo song to show band dynamics for the class later. This is admittedly a lot of band dynamics here. A lot of things are being used. It's like I opened a toolbox and I threw every tool into the song. With on a normal Sunday morning where you have more songs to play with, when you have more, when you're able when you don't have, you're not in a time crunch to demo every tool at once. You don't have to use every tool in the toolbox. You can vary it up. You can choose to up key maybe in another song or something. But because this song was going to be a demo song, that's why this song has got so many band dynamics tools inside them. In other words, don't take this as the standard. Don't take this as the normative way that it's supposed to sound like. It's meant to demonstrate to you different band dynamics concepts in different tools. Now, I didn't come up with this arrangement. I didn't come up with it from scratch or from zero. I know that out there in Spotify and on YouTube, there are people who already have arrangements for All Creatures of a God and King. You just need to type in All Creatures of a God and King, modern or contemporary, and you come up with very nice sounding arrangements. So I'm going to admit here, and I'm honest here, this arrangement, that the bass arrangement for All Creatures of God and King comes from the Norton Hall Band. Now I'm going to give you the names of the bands that I listen to for contemporary sounding hymns, and I'm going to provide that later after the webinar is over. But suffice to say, Norton Hall it's a US band. I mean, I think it's a seminary band or something, but they have very nice sounding arrangements. So I've got the bass sound and the bass arrangement from Norton Hall, and I built on that built upon their arrangement. I knew that I wanted to up key All Creatures of God and King in the last stanza. Norton Hall didn't have the up key, but Sovereign Grace had the up key. So I borrowed the bass, when I say bass, that's B-A-S-E, the foundational arrangement from the Norton Hall Band, with the up key section and up key idea from Sovereign Grace. You can see in my chart here, this little section, you can see the notes here. This is the Sovereign Grace arrangement for how they up key. Sorry, I'm obviously I'm not a singer, so excuse me for wrong notes. But this is where I got the up key idea from. And there was an additional problem. All Creatures and Jag是配得 were in completely different keys, because if I tried to play this in C, it was very comfortable for me to sing in C for All Creatures, but it became impossible to sing the chorus, the 你是配得 in C. I had to play it in G. So I had to do a key change. So in my head, I already know I need to plan a key change between All Creatures to 你是配得, and I used that Sovereign Grace idea to marry the two keys together. And then, right at the end of the bridge, I knew that I wanted to up key from C to D major for All Creatures. I didn't have to up key from the All Creatures by Sovereign Grace. I could make that transition to change the key from G major to D major. So that's why you heard the second key change happening. So on the macro level, this is the macro level arrangement, how to transit between different parts of songs. Now you start to get to a bit more detail. What is a modern sound for like this kind of a band arrangement? If I had an acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keyboard, bass, drums, and vocals, a six-piece band, right? Six-piece. How was I going to make it sound modern? The one thing that I can tell you is that if you want to make it sound modern, and you want to make it sound clean and modern, the easiest way to go about doing this is to make sure that each instrument is covering one function of rhythm or melody, right? One function of rhythm or melody. So piano players out there, if you're so used to playing the bass movements and the melody movements and the harmony movements all at once, SATB arrangement, 4-part harmony in your piano, for a modern sound, you can take all that out. You can have very little to do with your left hand. You're only using your right hand to play simple chords and simple lines. That's to simplify the piano players. Now, you're going to be very tempted to overplay as a piano player. I'm just going to put it out there to you. Piano players, you want a more modern sounding way, don't overplay. Really strip back. Have little to nothing to do with the left hand. Play leitmotifs or play little runs for your right hand. Because you want to let the rhythm be taken by the rhythm section. That is your drums and your bass. Drums and bass, I know that they are going to have a certain sound. I'll explain this as we go along. Electric guitar. The role of electric guitar in this song is not to be a soloist instrument. It's not going to be playing those Bohemian Rhapsody solo. The electric guitar is instead going to provide textures. The modern electric guitar sound is not your 80s hair metal or Iron Maiden, Metallica kind of sound. That is certainly one sound of electric guitar. But but for modern worship, the playing is a lot less. It's very stripped back. It's very textural because we are now letting our pedals, our gear, our equipment come up with sounds to support the rest of the instruments. So in other words, electric guitar is more for soundscaping than it really is for parts playing. And even if it's parts playing, we pick out very repetitive and very simple parts and almost as if we are like the second singer in the band, but not quite as melodic and overpowering the vocals. I'll show that to you in a second. All right. So I already knew in my head these are the kind of sounds that I want to have for the instruments. How did they sound like when I put them all together in the song? So for this, we're going to look at the tracks. Don't worry, you don't need to worry about what all this is. All you need to know is that this is each of the horizontal lines correspond to an instrument. Anyway, let's go to the start. Right here, when you heard the intro, you heard a few things, right? You heard how the bass and the drums are supporting one another. I'm going to solo, I'm going to try and, no, I cannot do this. All right. The one way to get your bass and your drums to tighten up and to sound together as one instrument is to get the bass player to follow the drummer's kick bass. Now I know it's a bit of a dated style because this is admittedly, this is the kind of style of drums and bass that I grew up with in a traditional rock band. The bass player and the drum player, the bass and drums were married. Two of them were best friends. Two of them played everything together. One way to tighten up was to make sure that the bass player played the notes together with the kick drum. I'm going to play that section again. You can hear, listen out for the bass drum and the bass player. So it followed the kick pattern from the bass. That's one way to tighten up your rhythm section to get a more modern sound. The drums, what he's doing is called a marching snare, and I like this because the marching snare kind of groove, and if you heard as you heard the arrangement, it evokes a certain kind of regality, doesn't it? It kind of sounds as if you are. Like the king is riding a horse and passive subjects, and you have that slightly militaristic theme happening in the background. I like that kind of idea, and I think that might be the idea that Norton Hall was going for. Who knows? I'll have to ask them one day. But I like that kind of regality, so I liked the bass player and the drummer to follow that kind of arrangement. Now, the acoustic guitar player, he was not playing full chords. He wasn't playing your block standard chords. What he was doing instead, he was playing very sparse chords. Instead, what you heard more was the pick sound. Acoustic guitar players, I'm very sorry, but in a full band arrangement, your full complex chords, right, they're not really going to be heard. You're only really going to be hearing the right hand. That tick-tick-tack, that the pick sounds. If you're a soloist by yourself, sure, try and play more complicated chords to fill in that harmonic space. But if you are playing a full band, you don't really have to play that big or complicated chord. You can get away with playing sparse chords, very open sounding chords. Choose a voicing like a, and just change the bass note. Because you're not really going to be heard. Yeah, that's what I want to tell you. Now, you didn't know this, but I don't think I hear this very clearly on Zoom, but the electric guitar was playing as well. What was the electric guitar doing? I can try and play this here. So you hear that very ethereal sounding sound. That was basically the electric guitar doing a volume swell. He got rid of the attack of the guitar and he swelled in with a delay and a reverb pedal that was pretty high in the mix. So here, like a droning sound. This is the modern electric guitar sound. It is interested in soundscaping to complement the piano player. The piano player over here she wasn't going to play all the bass notes or follow the melody or SATB parts in the song. What she did instead was to follow a motif. And that motif was and that motif carries on in the whole verse and also carries on in the ending of the song, sort of to bookend the song, so that the piano player gives a melodic identity to what he's playing. So I'm just going to solo the piano part. So you notice, right, not very much activity going on. That's because we want to start the song. In my arrangement, I started the song light, and I gave the melodic part to the piano player. So the piano player was going to be the lead player for the, for at least for the verse part of the song. This is what you should be doing when arranging parts of your band. You should be asking the band members, or in collaboration with your band members, hey, who's going to take the lead part in the verse? Who's going to take the lead part in the chorus? Who's going to drive the lead part in the verse and chorus, for example? I like this kind of collaboration. You should be collaborating with musicians. Know the strengths of your musicians, know what they can do, and you try and come up with parts that will get them to shine, get them to play at their best. All right, that was the intro and also the verse. Now, with the arrangement, I have a lot to get through, right? Verse 1 all the way to the high part here in chorus, right? I didn't want to play one-dimensionally. I didn't want to have it all the way dynamically flat, but because there's such a long runway, you can vary it. You can take longer time to vary the dynamics. I kept verse 1, verse 2 kind of the same. And this is something that you might want to do if you want to get people to get used to a certain sound in an arrangement. If you have 6 verses to get through in a hymn, you don't have to have 6 different versions of the verses to get through to play. You don't need to have 6 different levels of dynamics. You can have, let's say, intro, verse 1, verse 2 as the same, like slowly building, but generally the same level, and then you build towards something like a climax in another part of the verse. In my part, particularly for me, I want you all to look at verse 3, right? All the redeemed washed by his blood, come and rejoice in his great love, of praise, hallelujah. Now, Christ has defeated every sin. Cast all your burdens now on him. I wanted that to be like a highlight of this verse. I wanted it to be a highlight. I wanted to emphasize it. And the way that I did that is I got the rest of the band to play even more quietly just before that big pickup, just before the big Christ has defeated every sin. Let's hear that dynamic between verse 2 and verse 3.
Let all things that Creator bless, and worship him in humbleness. Oh, praise him. Hallelujah. Praise the Father, praise the Son, and praise the Spirit, three in one.
So vocalists didn't sing that hard.
Praise him. Oh, praise
gradually build toward
Hallelujah.
soft part.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All the redeemed washed by his blood, come and rejoice in his great love. Oh, praise him. Hallelujah. Christ has defeated every sin. Cast all your burdens now on him. Oh, praise him. Oh, praise him. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
So you heard that. Now I wanted to make Christ a lot bigger sounding, and the way I did that was to make sure the dynamics before that section was a lot softer, so that the contrast can be really magnified when the whole band comes in big on that section there. And vocalists, I'm sure you've heard, there was virtually no harmony at all in the verse, and the harmony only came in just before the transition. You have to be very selective with your harmony. If you over-harmonize and harmonize every single section of a song, that will lead into traditional sounding, the more traditional kind of sound. Choose instead be a bit more sparing sections as to where you want to introduce the harmony. And if it's harmony, simple harmony, a third up, fourth down, as I said before. In fact, it's okay, I think it's okay that the support singers and the worship leader sing in unison. Maybe in your introduction, just get the worship leader to sing by himself, or get one support singer to start the song off. Then as the verse progresses, let's say in verse 2, you get one or two more singers to sing unison together. So that way, that thickens up the vocal layer, the unison sound. And based on experience, the more that the vocalists come in and sing together, the congregation also opens up to sing together more. So vocalists, even though you're not harmonizing, even though you're not providing the harmony all the time, you're providing a bit of leadership in that when people see you sing, they also are inspired to sing. So let's go to that big, let's hear the big transition. Okay, I want to emphasize this. When we are doing a very drastic and very intense kind of volume drop, or a change in dynamics. If you're doing like if you do a cut, if you're doing a big hang, that signals the brain that there's something going to happen next. Something is going to change. Something different is on the way. So you use the big cut and the big hang to signal a transition. In our case here, we are going to transit from All Creatures toຢ是配得, and let's hear that big cut and the key change intoຢ是配得.
ຢ是配得，配得 全地，你是圣洁，圣洁。
Take note, the marching style groove is the bottom of the bridge.
敬拜你，愿尊贵荣耀、权柄和能力都归全能神。愿各族各方、万国和万邦敬拜神羔羊。
Going to a big transition.
Shall return and how to reign? Heaven and earth will join to sing.
So a few things I wanted to let you all know about what went through my head. When we make that, again, I reiterate, we want to make a big transition, use a cut, use a hang, because those are the ways to signal the brain that something different is coming up. In the when we went to ฏ是配得, when I was listening for different arrangements for ฏ是配得, I think there's only really one major arrangement out there, and that is the 赞美之前 version on YouTube. I couldn't really hear what the electric guitar was doing, so what I did was I drew upon my other musical ideas that I had in my head in relation to a Chinese sounding kind of song. And specifically, I used a motif that I heard from the Japanese drama, 1 Liter of Tears. It's a theme song. There's the that's from, I can't remember the name of the song. It's a Kaoru Amane song. Anyway, it's from a Japanese drama, in other words. And I had that in the bank because I watched 1 Liter of Tears, and I liked that theme song so much that I figured out how to play that on the guitar. Same with the chorus too, and we do the big band build. I couldn't really hear what the guitar was doing in the ฏ是配得 by 赞美之前. I ended up doing just a variation of the Japanese drama riff. That kind of, it still sounds very Chinese, very Japanese drama-ish, I suppose. So if your significant other is watching you, catches you watching Japanese drama, and hey, why are you wasting your time? You can say, I'm doing research. Now, one more thing I wanted to say, in the bridge of in the ฏ是配得, we went into a marching snare groove, and this is a callback to what we did in verse 1 up here in All Creatures of God and King. If there are good musical ideas in your arrangement, you can find places to reuse those ideas. I didn't have to think of a way to, some original idea for the bridge. I could copy and paste what we've done before in the earlier part of the song to give a musical callback, to have some musical continuity with the arrangement. You don't want to be so original with arrangement that every single section sounds different from the other. You want to try and be a bit more cohesive, and one way to do that is to call back different ideas from different parts of the song. Unless you're going for a dream theater kind of vibe where every 4 bars has a different musical idea. Now, on to the finale. I want you to hear the big build up from the transition between ฏ是配得 to verse 4 of All Creatures, and it is entitled, and this is, I wanted it to be big and majestic. That was what I was going for. You can find this section.
Shall return and bow to reign. Heaven and earth will join to sing. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. Then who shall fall on bended knee? All creatures of our God and King. Oh, praise Him.
dip down a bit so we can drive harder.
Hallelujah.
It's going to be one more dip.
Hallelujah. Oh, praise Him. Oh, praise Him.
Notice the eighth note drive. All the instruments are kind of driving together.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
And big on a D. One thing I want to let's talk about a few things here. We wanted it to be big and majestic. So the way that we made it big and majestic was the whole band did a transition from the transition chord here. Notice that this is not in the key of G major. It's actually the 5 chord of D major right here, right? And when we hung there, everyone basically stopped playing but let the notes sustain out. What I got the electric guitar player to do was do a pick slide. So electric guitar players, you have that unique sound with the electric guitar. There are so many things that the electric guitar can do to provide energy and to propel the song forward. A pick slide, not pig slide, not two. The pick slide is when you take the pick and you. It sounds terrible on acoustic guitar because it's not meant to be there, but once you put some distortion and some delay on an electric guitar, it sounds amazing. It has got this propulsion effect. It makes you want to it's like the song just jumps. And of course, the reason why I highlighted and I bold and underlined these words is because heaven was when the rest of the band was going to come in. Bow to rain, ew. I love what you want to say. So, yep, electric guitar players, they're not there for your death metal sounds, but they are there to provide energy, to provide ways to propel the song to a different kind of dynamic. The last 2 things I want to talk about this arrangement is, firstly, the last 2 things. Line 3, then who shall fall on bended knee, and the punches there, right? The reason why I did punches there was I wanted to bring out an emphasis, to emphasize the line, all creatures are God and King, the line after. It's almost as if the instruments were asking along with the singer, Then who shall fall on bended knee? Who? All creatures of our God and King. It just gave the instruments that kind of dynamism to sound as if they were asking along, like, who is it? All creatures of our God and King. I know it sounds cheesy when I say it out like that and verbalize it, but musically I think it created that kind of emphasis effect on the words. And the last 2 lines in the O Praise Him, they were examples of how you can do 8th note driving. And when you drive as a band, that means you stop doing like syncopated strumming. You drive along the Oh praise Him, 8th note. Oh praise Him, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Bring it down again. Oh praise Him, oh praise Him, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Bring it up so you can bring it big. So you notice when I did those 8th note driving, it made the louder parts of the strumming at the end much more emphasized, right? So that's one way to bring about an emphasis. And of course, to round up the whole arrangement and to make it cohesive and complete, I got the pianist, Amelia, our pianist, to repeat the motif that we heard earlier in the introduction. And you might remember that earlier on, she played this motif, this motif here. I got her to play the same thing right at the end.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
And of course, a big ending there. So I like to call that book ending because you start with a certain sound and you end with a certain sound. It may not be the correct musical term, so all you grade 8ers out there, all you with doctorates in music theory out there, I'm so sorry if I butchered the term, but I call this book ending. And if you notice, the electric guitar is not playing chords, he's actually playing like a lead line. So it's not like he's playing a separate. It's almost as if he's playing a counter melody, but it is meant to support the main melody and the main motif, which is Amelia's piano part. One tip that I can give electric guitar players when coming up with parts to play is that if you can hum it, if you can sing your part, that is a benchmark as to whether the part is going to be melodic or not. And I think that melodic parts fit better into modern arrangements than, let's say, the like ascending 16th note triplet scale. You know, you play E minor on the, you do those crazy runs on the guitar. This is not the opportunity, and this is not the place to do those kind of things. You want to support the melody, and one way that I think electric guitarists can do that is to come out with singable, simple, and repetitive little guitar parts, little guitar hooks, as you call it.